Those who never do always fail. This is something that I'm trying very hard to live by this year. The understanding that the effort that I'm putting forward is always worth it, because to not put the effort forth is to automatically fail at whatever it is that I'm trying to do. Note also that this does not mean that the effort automatically guarantees success. That what we do, those things for which we strive, are automatically wins. I've put forth a whole lot of effort in my life. I've put forth a whole lot of effort, particularly in the past couple of years, towards growing the awareness of literature on my other channel, Strip Cover Lit. And sometimes it gets hard because momentum isn't there sometimes. Momentum is not always present. And it feels that sometimes effort is wasted. But I think that so long as the effort is capitalized upon, that the lessons are learned at the end of that effort, that it's possible to move forward, to grow, to get better. I think that one of the things that is prevalent in society today, one of the things that bothers me very much to hear, and that also has grown exponentially over the past couple of years, is a negativity culture. This is to say that, okay, so look, I'm not making this video about these two people, okay? But there are two people that are in the mainstream media all the time: Donald Trump and Elon Musk. You can't turn on the television without seeing something about both of them, not even an either or. You can't open up your internet browser and not be bombarded by articles that criticize both of these individuals. And there are criticisms there to be had for sure, but one of the criticisms that has become sort of overwhelming the past couple of years is people will point out where these two men have failed, where these two men have shortcomings, where these two men have tried and failed at something. And it's almost as if the mainstream media wants you to believe that these people, one of whom is a president of the United States, a two-term president of the United States, and the other of whom is the richest person at moments in the history of the world by anything that we can accurately measure, that these two people are failures because, well, the Cybertruck does not do this or that, because Donald Trump had a business that went under or had some properties that had failed. There is this prevalent idea in the mainstream media and thereby in culture writ large that failures mean a person is a failure. Unfortunately, most of these criticisms come from people who are doing nothing more than sitting at a laptop and just haphazardly putting words on paper, putting words down that they use to make themselves feel better, that they use to make people who share their same opinions feel better. And I don't believe in subscribing to all of anyone's opinions. I think that this is something that is another negative in culture now. So I am trying to, I think that the only way we can change culture is to change ourselves, to broadcast to other people those things that we wish to see, be the change you wish to see in the world, right? To broadcast those ideas, to broadcast those values that we want to see propagated, to do those things time and time again. There is, from history, from Teddy Roosevelt himself, a quote that is very, very useful to me when these ideas become simply too overwhelming. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without shortcoming. But who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who, at the best, knows, in the end, the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat. Roosevelt in this quote talks about the arena. One way to interpret this idea of the arena is that this can be seen as the arena of public discourse, the marketplace of ideas. But what if the arena itself is falling apart? What if the culture is rotten? My belief is that right now we are living in a rotten culture. Then we have to pick up the pieces and try to rebuild the arena at the same time that we are playing the game, which is unfortunately also at the same time that the crowd is throwing trash at us. But it is incumbent upon us to do so because the stakes otherwise are dire. The stakes otherwise are cultural collapse, are civilizational collapse. It is my belief that the arena is worth rebuilding. I consider myself a nihilist, someone who thinks that we have to constantly test the ideas being presented towards us, and we have to assess whether they are worthy of that cause, whether there is any merit to them. At its core, that is what I believe nihilism to be. And because I do believe that culture is worth rebuilding, that civilization is worth saving, I plan on doing my part in that act of reclamation. And I promise you, I will work tirelessly and perhaps fruitlessly to do so. I will work in that effort. That quote from Roosevelt does hurt me in part because part of what I do on the internet is criticism. My work on Stripped Cover Lit, my other YouTube channel, is literary criticism. And at times I have fallen short of what I hope to do, which is the propagation of literature through talking about literature. The propagation of literature through discussing the larger ideas at play and at stake in that literature. It is my belief that literature is a storage place for our species. That what we do with literature is try to communicate those things which make us human, and that allows us to rise above previous generations because we are starting with their level of wisdom, that repository of wisdom, that repository of knowledge, which literature represents, is there for us to take from. And at times I have fallen short and I have fallen into base reader's response criticism. I like this, I don't like that, which is important in its own way, but it is not the mission. The mission is the propagation of the repository of knowledge and wisdom which literature represents. I believe that part of the problem of culture today is that the institutions themselves are defunct. They are rotten. They have abdicated their core responsibilities. You see this in the mainstream media constantly lying in order to try to propagate some agenda that they have. You see this in the institutions constantly sort of finagling things so that their ideas, their beliefs, whether they are tested or not, and normally they are not, I contend that almost always these beliefs are not tested. They are trying to propagate them anyway. And because that is what the institutions are doing, the mass of us have no place to learn the creative act in the process of building itself. The act, the verb of building, bildungsroman, to build the individual. We have no place to learn that because we are constantly at the behest of this society of negativity. There is another quote This one from Eric Weinstein that haunts me daily. It is a quote about this very phenomenon. Eric Weinstein with Lex Friedman was talking about whether or not the institutions are doing what they're supposed to do, whether or not those strong individuals who can. I'm not claiming that I can make the difference. What I'm claiming is I can put forth the effort. One of the things that I have always said is that I would rather be an agent of change than a force for good, because the idea of good is constantly changing. The idea of good is something that melds to that the society melds to what those in charge are trying to distill. You ask the mainstream media what is good today, probably you will not agree with it. This quote from Eric Weinstein, which I will present, is one that is haunting because of these ideas, because those in charge of the institutions do not have the best at heart, have not formed ideas of what is good and right and grown them. They have not used things like literature as a repository for wisdom, as a repository for knowledge. They have perverted these things and finagled them in their own ways, in their own likeness, to get their own benefit. Oh, it's a terrible choice. A terrible choice. If you do it inside academics, you are forced to constantly show great loyalty to the consensus, and you distinguish yourself with small, almost microscopic heresies in general. When you go outside, you meet lunatics and crazy people, madmen, and these are people who do not usually subscribe to the consensus position and almost always lose their way. And the key question is, will progress likely come from someone who has miraculously managed to stay within the system and is able to take on a larger amount of heresy that is sort of unthinkable? In which case, that will be fascinating. Or is it more likely that somebody will maintain a level of discipline from outside of academics and be able to make use of the freedom that comes from not having to constantly affirm your loyalty to the consensus of your field? And so, the question remains, do we remain inside the mainstream and create those microscopic heresies, knowing that there is a greater chance that when we create that microscopic heresy, that little difference, that little change, there is a greater chance that our smaller contributions will be woven into the cultural cloth? The culture will move forward with this little thing that we have contributed, and we have contributed that, knowing that we hopefully have worked toward something that will improve? Or do we risk it and go out on our own, living in the woods and raving like madmen, all the while also knowing that while there are fewer rules and limitations, we risk losing our way entirely, knowing that all of our effort may end for naught? The choice is fairly easy. For me, I've never been the type that fits in or gets along. I have to be the madman raving in the woods. Much of the fire that I have built through my life's work has been lost to the night's wind. And I have to live with that. And I know, personally, that this is the fire I have to craft. And I promise to do so. And so, I will turn back to literature in order to make this point, mostly to myself. There are things for which we're willing to die. If you look inside, there is something for which you would die. There are things for which we would sacrifice ourselves. There are beliefs, there are ideas for which I would sacrifice my being. Those are the same things for which we must strive to live. Emily Dickinson, the greatest of all poets, I will hear no arguments, has a poem about just that. I died for beauty, but was scarce adjusted in the tomb, when one who died for truth was lain in an adjoining room. He questioned softly why I failed. For beauty, I replied, and I for truth. Themself are one, we brethren are, he said. And so, as kinsmen met a night, we talked between the rooms, until the moss had reached our lips and covered up our names.